I'm not about to give you an elaborate list. You can dive further into this topic and it gets much more abstract, but we aren't going that deep today. You're not going to be a novelist by the end of this video. This is a quick and dirty toolkit for you to keep on hand that's simple enough to remember when you're in the moment and you need to make a description. Let's break open the kit. Here are your tools: senses, action, emotion, and comparison. All descriptive traits we innately use, but aren't always aware of. By actively using these 4 elements, we can mix and match them to create an endless list of descriptions. Discussing the 5 senses is a simple yet effective way to handle your descriptions. It's something we lean into naturally, but it can also be a common roadblock for people, something DMs get stuck on and reuse the same thing over and over again. One of the biggest reasons I felt like my descriptions were getting boring in my earlier days is because I noticed how frequently I started things off with, "you see." You see the room is full of stuff. You see that man is wearing armor. You see this, you see that. Everything was a description of visuals. But we experience the world through much more than visuals. We have a whole array of senses, and we can lean into all of them to create evocative descriptions. Try and keep each one in mind: sight, sound, scent, touch, and taste. Taste is uncommon, but still, jump between them when delivering descriptions. Pick 1 or 2 that you haven't used in a while or seem especially relevant to the situation, and focus on fleshing out those sensations. Every moment comes with multiple types of stimuli, so try and think about what each of our senses would pick up on. Let's say your players walk into the docks district. You can describe how it looks: the rows of white-sailed ships all anchored down, and the many busy sailors working to unload them. But what else? Scents are one of the first things that hit us when we walk into a new place. So how would the docks smell? Well, they're on the sea, so we can describe that fresh ocean air, which kind of stings the nostrils a little bit sometimes. And maybe there's the stench of fish being barreled up from the fishing boat's recent hauls. Keep going. What do busy docks sound like? They hear sailors shouting orders and singing shanties, wooden crates smacking up against the docks backed by creaking ships and subtle waves. Touch is the feeling of moisture on their skin and how it gets slightly colder with the breeze off the water. And there's that taste of salt in the air. Utilizing every sense adds variety. It keeps the things you're saying fresh and new. Additionally, it provides a more thorough picture of the world you're in, pulling an otherwise 2-dimensional scene into the 3rd dimension, adding extra layers so your players don't just understand the moment, but feel the moment. I recommend you stick to just 1 or 2 most of the time, at least when you're starting to flex this muscle. But you don't have to always limit yourself. There will be times where a description calls for more. You might not want to take as long as I did with those docs and cover each sense one by one, but you get the idea. The next tool is action. Action is what's physically happening in the moment. It's movement and activity, no matter how subtle. Those white sails ruffling in the wind, a horse-drawn cart zipping past you, the wizard's semantic motions followed by the flash of a fireball, all fall under action. I often see descriptions of action as the default, the thing we most commonly go to. There's a lot of ways to approach it, though. Intuitively, you'll know what the action is, such as taking a bad guy's turn during combat and having them swing their sword. You'll know that the action taking place is the swing of a sword. Taking a literal approach and saying, "the bandit swings his sword," makes for a great baseline, but feels rather dull on its own, especially if you repeat it every single time the bandit swings his sword. The next step is to elaborate on the action. Pretty it up by adding in extra details. One easy way to do this is to break the action into several steps. Think about what precedes or follows the action in question. Sure, the bandit swings his sword, but then what? Let's follow that motion through from start to finish. The bandit starts by planting his feet and twisting his body to build up momentum before he swings his sword. And then it clashes into your shield and glances down into the dirt below. We took one simple action and turned it into an entire series. To go even further beyond, this is where we can start mixing our tools together to get different results. We can also add detail to our action by leaning into our senses. The bandit swings his sword and it clashes into your shield. The metallic clang starts to echo off the walls. The reverberation of the strike sends a tingle through your hand, and you see an opening as his sword glances off into the dirt. We have now intermixed action and senses together to create a description that hits on several notes, and we'll be able to mix and match all of our tools in different ways. Emotion-based descriptions focus on how things feel, be it a character's personal emotions and opinions, or the general atmosphere, the vibes. I like to think of emotion as the other side of action. Like the pair exist as two halves to each scene. They're at the core of every description, and our other tools, senses and comparison, seek to expand on them. If you describe a child as smiling brightly, or a voice as trembling and shaken, or a graveyard as eerie and unsettling, you're playing towards emotion. If you go on to say a dense fog rolls into the cemetery, making it hard to see the surroundings, that's playing both sides of the coin. The movement of that fog is a physical thing happening around your players. It's action. But the purpose of that action is to develop a sense of creepy, atmospheric horror. It's an action that pushes an emotion. There are many ways to blend these two tools together. If we take our bandit from earlier and we twist that action-based description into one focused on emotion, we might say something like, the bandit wildly swings his sword out of desperation, his poorly formed strike deflecting into the ground. His eyes widen in fear, nervous of what's to come now that he's opened up his guard. Yes, this acts as a combat description of what's occurring all the same. But it doubles up by telling the table what's going through this bandit's head. It's no longer just about what he's doing, but why he's doing it, and how his demeanor changes with the action's outcome. It paints the scene in a different light, and we can use all sorts of emotions to change that light. We can give this scene the sense of desperation and fear, or go in a completely different direction and make the bandit seem cocky and brazen. It's all about what you want to convey. The last of the four tools is comparison. This includes metaphors, analogies, and similes. No, you do not need to understand the difference between the three. It does not matter. There are two main reasons to use a comparison in your description. Either to make the abstract understandable, or to make the mundane interesting. To make the abstract understandable means to take things we likely haven't experienced, or things we could misinterpret, and compare it to something relatable. For instance, let's say you want to describe how a creature bursts from a dead body. The specifics of what that looks like could get lost from your imagination to mine. What exactly do you mean by burst? To narrow things down, perhaps you compare this to the xenomorphs in Alien, something we're all familiar with and gives us a very clear mental image of a creature bursting from the chest going, ah. But maybe that's not what you mean. Maybe it's more appropriate to say, a creature bursts from the body with the force of a hand grenade. That's providing me with a very different mental image. Now I'm picturing something explosive that sends bits of corpse all across the room. This comparison provides clarity by grounding the situation in something we're all familiar with. Sure, your players and I probably haven't seen a hand grenade go off in real life, but we've seen it on TV, be it fiction or an episode of Mythbusters. Even if it's an imperfect understanding, it's still something we all understand. This type of comparison becomes more useful the more abstract the thing you're trying to describe is. For instance, if you want to convey the effects of a spell, that can be kind of tough because magic isn't real. There doesn't exist a baseline for that kind of thing. I often find myself trying to compare D&D's magic to a real-world counterpart. I might describe the spell Hold Person as feeling akin to sleep paralysis, or your whole body going numb like you're in a suit of Novocaine. Tasha's hideous laughter is an inverse panic attack, where you can't fully control yourself or your emotions no matter how hard you try. Teleporting might be a bright flash washing over you, killing all of your senses, before you reappear somewhere else, fully disoriented, like waking up at a friend's house when you forgot you were staying there. Takes you that second to relax and refamiliarize yourself with the room. To make the mundane interesting is what we've been trying to do this entire video. Take ships at the docks or the swing of a sword and make it entertaining. Make it something that kickstarts our table's imagination. These kinds of comparisons are usually a bit more poetic, what you'd consider to be stereotypical of a metaphor. Conscience is a man's compass, that kind of thing. Going back to the docks, we could refer to those ships' sails as flailing with aggression. So much so that if they weren't tied down, they'd have run up and hit you for the crime of being close enough to hit. All we're saying here is, it's really windy, but that twist of a comparison creates a description that's more evocative. It provides the moment with a sense of personality. It's another tool that makes your players not just understand the moment, but feel it. Of course, we cannot go further without combining our tools one last time. Let's try and throw a comparison into our previous description. The bandit plants his feet and twists back, building up momentum before wildly swinging his sword in desperation, like a wounded animal trapped in a corner. His poorly formed strike clashes into your shield, echoing off the walls. You see his eyes widen in fear as he's opened up his guard, as what you hear is the ringing of metal hitting metal. What he hears is his death knell. The goal is not to have you write out full sentences like this and be constantly aware of how each word you use could fall into one of these categories. The goal is to make this stuff intuitive, something that doesn't require active thought or analysis. But if you want to improve, it can help to put in some effort in consciously understanding why you say the things you say, to think about the effects these tools have. It's also a useful reminder to have on hand, something that can cue me into realizing, shit, I've been exclusively describing visuals again, and I have those other methods clearly laid out for me. That way I get quick inspiration for ways to change it up and avoid getting stuck in that rut. I keep them written behind my DM screen, and it only takes me a second, maybe two, to review them and reset my brain. There's a lot of ways to view and categorize these concepts. Like I said, it gets abstract fast. But if you have any particular approach you take to descriptions, or other terms you want to throw into the toolkit, leave them down below. And if you want to see me make better quality content more frequently, consider joining the Patreon. You too could be a Suave Tommy just like Nolan Widmer, or one of Tom's debonair like Jaso Queso. Two people who are indescribable. My patrons are like eldritch horrors. The mere thought of them would shatter your psyche. And I'm avoiding describing them because it's interesting, not because I do not know how.